Thank you, Madam Chairman. And as we're talking about motorized vehicles, I had an opportunity to go to the southern border on Friday out to McAllen, Texas, and very clear impressions there that as we deal with border enforcement issues, part of our reality in being hamstrung in our ability to enforce is that we have public lands along that border that are held by the Department of Interior in refuge and wilderness status. And we can't get access to a road, to a trail for an ATV, so our Customs and Border Patrol agents can patrol that. We're not asking for a major highway around there, but I know that this hearing is designed to look specifically at how we derive revenues. We also need to think about national security issues and how we enforce our own laws when you juxtapose that with other priorities within the federal agencies. And it's something that I'm working on, and I would hope that the committee would have an opportunity to look at just that. I wanted to comment, Dr. Nelson, on some of the points that you raised, and the fact that in Utah, you're actually working to expand your access in certain areas despite the federal policies. What I've heard from just about every one of you is that whether it's in oil and gas or whether it's what we're doing for multiple use and recreation, motorized vehicles, we're kind of doing it in spite of some of the hurdles that are put in place from a federal perspective. And the example, again, of not being able to site solar facilities on our public lands, it just seems so inconsistent with this message from this administration that we want to move towards renewables. Well, here's Utah, a perfect example. You have oil and gas resources, you've got the potential for renewable, and it's the federal policies that are limiting your ability to access any of them. And the term that you used, Dr. Nelson, non-preferred energy options, is one that I think that we need to be paying attention to. You can't say we have an all-of-the-above energy policy while at the same time say that some of these are not exactly preferred. So I think it is important that our states do what they can to, as you say, take back the reins. Easier said than done, but these are issues that I think that we need to address. The director is still in the room with us here, Madam Chair, and I'm going to be submitting a couple other questions to him for the record, but one that I would like him to look into is, according to Honors statistics, back in 2003, the reported revenue from Alaska was $97.7 million. Just 10 years later, in 2013, it was down to $33.6 million, and this includes rents, royalties, bids, et cetera. So I'm going to be asking him to outline for me what he thinks explains this trend and whether or not it is reversible. I think the question that I will leave Mr. Pierce with is one that relates to management of our timber resources in Alaska. As you may know, the governor in the state has appointed a state timber task force to come up with ideas as to how we can increase timber production. And one of the recommendations from that task force was to create a 2 million acre state forest out of our current National Forest System land. So the question to you is whether or not the National Forest Coalition and the Schools Coalition would support states managing some of our federal lands on a pilot project basis to test the effectiveness of state management. Is that something that the coalition has looked into and would be supportive of?
Absolutely. In fact, there's a similar discussion at in Idaho. Mm-hmm. And as you know, we have 2.5 million acres of state trust land in our state, which actually goes to county schools and at different level schools. So absolutely, we would support that.
Good.
Be willing to help with that.
Great. And then a last question here, and this is to you, Mr. Schaefer. You have referred to the revenues that that we see coming from offshore, but you also refer to the cancellation of the Atlantic lease sale back in 2011, lack of a current schedule. What does this lack of certainty going forward do to the prospects, not only for oil and gas revenues, but just to the economy there in general? Can you speak to that very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at this point, the lack of certainty around specifically the Atlantic really is probably going to prevent any serious activity from operators. Within the last few days, they've approved some seismic, initial planning for seismic in the area, but without the prospect of actually saying, well, in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, we're going to be able to lease that area, it really wouldn't make a lot of sense for operators, in my opinion, to go out and spend, hundreds of millions of dollars to shoot those seismic studies without the prospect of actually being able to lease the lands in the future. So.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.